Do you need a science background to study nutrition? That question sounds sensible, but it's actually the wrong place to start. And if you start with these wrong assumptions, they can stop you from ever pursuing something that you might be genuinely good at. Because here's what I've seen over and over again. The people who worry that they don't have the right science background are really the ones who struggle with learning the most. The people who struggle are often the ones that assume they already understand it all and know what studying nutrition involves, and don't realise until it's too late that they don't. When people imagine studying nutrition, they picture dense biochemistry, endless terminology, and trying to remember things that never quite make sense. And for most people, that image doesn't come from the subject at all. It comes from their experience at school. So when someone says, I don't have a science background, what they're usually saying is, I don't want to feel lost or stupid again. And that fear makes people either walk away from studying nutrition entirely or choose courses that don't actually teach it properly. So if you're new to the channel, my name's Dale Pinnock. I'm the founder and the principal of the International School of Nutritional Medicine, and I'm a double degree and postgraduate trained nutritionist with over 30 years in the profession. The school has now trained over 2,000 graduates from every continent who are out there applying this in the real world and doing the work that they love. So here's the first thing that matters. Nutrition isn't about memorizing scientific facts. It's about understanding how different pieces of science fit together and how they show up in the real world. When nutrition is taught properly, you're not asked to remember disconnected facts. You're taught how the body behaves, how it responds to inputs, and how different systems talk to each other over time. Understanding comes from connection, not just memorizing things. It comes from seeing how evidence, mechanisms, and real-world outcomes relate to one another. That kind of understanding isn't intimidating. It's logical. It has structure. It has cause and effect. And you don't need to start this learning journey already fluent in any one branch of science. You need to be guided through how the pieces fit together in the right order. So let me give you an example of this. Take blood sugar regulation, something that sits right at the heart of nutrition and something that everyone's talking about. A poor quality course may start by throwing terms at you. Insulin, glucose transporters, glycogen synthesis, cellular signaling pathways, all technically correct and vital to know, but completely overwhelming if you don't know where anything fits. Good teaching does the opposite. It starts with a simple question. What's blood sugar for? And the answer isn't complicated. Blood sugar exists to deliver energy to cells, particularly the brain. That's the purpose of it. Everything else builds from that. From there, you introduce insulin not as a molecule to memorize, but as a signal, a message that tells cells energy is available. Once that makes sense, glucose transport suddenly isn't abstract anymore. It's simply the mechanism by which that message is acted upon. Only then does it make sense to talk about what happens when that signaling goes wrong. At no point does the learner need a science background. What they need is sequence, explanation, and context. That's the difference between learning science and being taught science. Most people who believe they don't have the right science background are not responding to their own limitations. They're responding to a previous experience. Very often, that experience is one where science was presented as something you either kept up with or fell behind on. Concepts arrived quickly, explanations were thin, and the expectation was that you would remember things before you had any real chance of actually understanding them. When that happens, people don't just lose track of the material, they lose confidence in their ability to learn it at all. They start to internalize the idea that science is a talent rather than a process, something that some people are naturally good at and others simply aren't. And once that belief settles in, it becomes really difficult to actually change it. But real understanding doesn't work like that. Understanding is not something you either have or don't have. It's something that's built gradually, intentionally, through repetition, context, and connection. Ideas make sense when they're placed in relationship to other ideas, not delivered in isolation. In teaching nutrition, I've seen this play out again and again. Students with no formal science background who initially describe themselves as not academic often go on to develop a far deeper working understanding of nutrition than they ever thought possible. Not because they suddenly became more clever, but because the material was taught in a way that respected how learning works. And I've also seen the opposite. Highly educated students, sometimes with science degrees, struggle badly when teaching lacks structure, clarity, or narrative. Prior knowledge can help, but it can't compensate for poor teaching. So when someone tells me they aren't scientific, I don't hear a fixed limitation. I hear the echo of an education system that prioritised speed and assessment over true understanding. Now, it's important to be clear about something here. None of this is about making nutrition easy in the sense of watering it down. Nutrition done properly is rigorous. It demands thinking. It demands attention. It asks you to engage with complexity rather than shy away from it. We don't do surface level. But rigor and confusion are not the same thing. Confusion comes from missing foundations. Rigor comes from building on solid ones. True rigor is clarity, it's depth, it's precision, it's being able to explain not just what happens, but why it happens and under what conditions it might change. And that level of understanding is only possible when the basics are taught properly, slowly, and in the right order. When a course respects the learner enough to start from first principles and define language as it's introduced to constantly link mechanisms back to real physiological outcomes, the science stops feeling hostile. Instead of being something you survive, it becomes something you actually engage with. You start to recognize patterns. You begin to anticipate outcomes. The body stops feeling mysterious and starts to feel intelligible. That's when learning becomes not just manageable, but it actually becomes fun. So look, the real question is not whether you need a science background. The real question is whether the education you're considering is designed to teach science in a way that actually makes sense. Does it assume you already know things, or does it take responsibility for building that knowledge? Does it prioritize understanding over recall? Does it help you think practically and in context, or does it simply ask you to memorize terminology? Those distinctions matter far more than what subjects you took at school or how long ago you last opened a textbook. Because when teaching is designed properly, people don't just learn information. They learn how to reason, to connect ideas, and how to apply what they know in meaningful ways. And that is what makes the difference between feeling intimidated and feeling genuinely confident when it comes to studying nutrition. So if you've been interested in nutrition for years but held back by the idea that you're not scientific enough, I'd encourage you to pause before writing yourself off. With the right teaching, nutrition is not something you either get or you don't. It's something you grow into. Understanding develops over time as concepts click into place and the bigger picture begins to emerge. And this channel exists for exactly that reason, to help you understand what studying nutrition actually involves, how high quality nutrition education is structured, and what to look for if you're serious about learning this wonderful subject properly.